I tell my son to hold his breath when we drive past row after row of banana plants in Central America. The chemical pesticides that hang in the air smell like death. And I get that same sinking feeling like when we drive by acre after acre of blackened hillsides, slashed and burned to grow a few subsistence crops. In other places, the topsoil's already been lost, the land reduced to a moonscape of baked red clay. But we keep driving to visit the farms that are a green patchwork of trees, rice paddies, and garden beds, alive with hummingbirds, butterflies, and human beings. When my son and I are greeted by giggling children who spill out of small palm-roofed homes with earthen walls and dirt floors, I'm struck by how much we face losing to threats such as climate change. But I'm also struck by what a wonderful solution is right under our feet. The soil that grows our food is also key to regenerating the planet and a climate suitable to human life. Whether we're talking about the threats or the solutions, farmers are our future. So, how do we shift our eating habits away from unhealthy food grown on conventional farms that degenerate the environment to food that regenerates healthy bodies, healthy ecosystems, and a healthy climate? That's the question I was asking when I graduated from college, and when most of my friends were contemplating where they'd find a job that would pay the rent. Serving as a Peace Corps volunteer in Panama showed me how subsistence farmers could lead the world to a regenerative food system. Living in rural Panama, I saw slash and burn farming firsthand. A farmer cuts down some forest and burns it so the ash helps grow a few subsistence crops. But burning also harms the soil. And most of those nutrients that were in the forest, they go up in smoke, contributing to global warming. In a few months, the ash and topsoil wash away, so the farmer moves on and burns more forest. After this cycle is repeated a number of times, the topsoil is completely lost, along with its capacity to store the water and carbon plants need to grow. Over time, this degenerates the planet's ability to sustain human life. The farmers in Panama wanted a better way of farming. They just never had the opportunity to learn one. They couldn't transform how they'd farmed for generations with only a few months of technical assistance, especially from a gringa who had just recently learned the language well enough to stop saying 3 fleas when I meant 3 inches. They needed long-term support from a local expert if they were going to grow an abundance of food that would regenerate the planet. So after Peace Corps, I went to work for an organization that I thought could provide that kind of assistance. But just a few weeks after I hired the first 2 field trainers in Honduras, my boss announced that he wasn't going to pay their salaries. So naturally, I quit that day and gave myself 24 hours to figure out another way to pay their salaries. I thought, if I can't figure it out quick, I might as well stop wasting everybody's time. Well, the next morning, a miracle happened. Even though it seemed like there's no way I'd start a new nonprofit with no money, I got an email that morning from a Swiss tourist I'd met on my last trip to Central America. He'd seen the reforested farms from my Peace Corps days. And so on the very day when I was either going to start a new nonprofit or give up and get a real job, this man I hardly knew offered to wire me some startup money. I ran right to the bank, opened a new account, and the next day there was $6,000 from Switzerland in that account. And that's how I was able to start Sustainable Harvest International. Within a few years, we had a half dozen Central American field trainers teaching farmers what I considered sustainable farming practices. I encouraged an organic ecological approach, but sometimes the field trainers told me that chemical fertilizers were the only thing that would work on such poor soils. So I went along with this because I didn't have a lot of confidence in my farming know-how, and I figured, hey, it's better than burning more forest, right? Well, over the years, my colleagues and I have gained a lot more knowledge, and we're now certain that chemical fertilizers degenerate the environment just as much as burning does. And we've seen how organic practices can outperform conventional farming. So, by 2007, Sustainable Harvest International was promoting 100% organic practices. It was a year later, in 2008, that Demetrio Martinez, a farmer in Membrillo, Panama, joined our program. He'd grown up seeing his family burn more forest every year to grow their crops, but still not have enough money to send him to school beyond the 6th grade. When Demetrio became a father himself, he wanted more for his own children, so he went to work on a conventional rice plantation where his coworkers got sick and died from exposure to agrochemicals. It hardly seemed worth the $6 a day that he earned, but Demetrio didn't see a better option until our field trainer offered to visit his family every week to share knowledge that would allow Demetrio's family to produce an abundance of food without burning and without chemicals. After 5 years, Demetrio had the confidence to continue on his own and share what he'd learned with other farmers. By then, he was comfortable using compost, cover crops, and mulch to regenerate healthy, productive soils. And he knew how to create an agro-ecosystem of fruit, hardwood, spice, and nut trees growing together with coffee and sugarcane around rice plantations that are weeded and fertilized by fish. More fruits and vegetables grow on a terraced hillside. So now his farm's ecosystem takes care of itself with birds, bees, soil microbes, and all sorts of creatures that have come back to the land, each playing their part. And now Demetrio's family grows enough for a healthy diet and income to meet their other basic needs. Plus, since they grow on the same land every year, they don't have to burn more forest. They don't burn more forest. Now, this might not mean a lot if we're just talking about the 4 acres that Demetrio farms. But Demetrio is one of 3,000 Sustainable Harvest International farmers who've transformed 25,000 acres of degraded land to regenerative organic farms, planting 4 million trees over the last 20 years. Yeah, I'm psyched, it's great. But you know what? It's not nearly enough, and that's what keeps me up at night. Our current food system is responsible for about half of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. And even if we stop all emissions tomorrow, our planet is going to keep warming because of what we've already put into the atmosphere, we're going to continue down the path towards extinction. But there's still something that can save us, and it's the soil on farms like Demetrio's. All we have to do is increase the carbon in the world's soils by 4 parts per thousand, or 0.4%, and we can totally do that. There are 500 million small-scale farms that produce most of the world's food with almost no resources. If we help these farms become regenerative, like Demetrio's farm, they'll draw down 6 billion tons of carbon out of the atmosphere into the soil every year, which is equivalent to shutting down every coal-fired plant on Earth. And they'll create, all with good food. And not only that, they'll also create 3 billion acres of habitat for more biodiversity. That's 30 times bigger than all our country's national parks combined. And of course, they'll produce delicious, nutrient-dense, poison-free food for all of us. And these 500 million farmers are ready to do their part. But they can only do it if we do our part. So here's a couple easy ways that you can join them. First, buy as much food as you can from regenerative, organic farms, preferably in your own community. Elliot Coleman, my favorite farmer here in Maine, likes to point out that we happily pay more for better cars, TVs, shoes, but when it comes to the food that will either degenerate or regenerate our bodies and our planet, why won't we pay a little more for something so much better? And second, support programs that help farmers make this transition to regenerative farming. It's time for all of us to come together to build the fertile ground for a more abundant future. When I see my son's face light up when he pulls a bright orange carrot out of the rich earth, I know his children won't have such a joyful life unless humanity digs in and gives it all we've got in the next 10 years. If we want a happy, healthy future for our children, we'll support regenerative farms because farmers are our future. Thank you.